With more than 400 people already arrested in the first week of the new security law in Hong Kong, countries are finally waking up and taking action. Canada, along with a lot of other countries, are now no longer extraditing Hong Kong citizens if they are requested to do so by the Chinese government. By now, I'm sure you know that the UK government has offered BNO passport holders in Hong Kong a path to citizenship in the UK, and now more countries are considering changing their immigration laws to help out Hong Kong people who are fleeing persecution. In today's video, we will dive into all of that and take a look at what makes the new security law so threatening. All of that coming up right after the intro. Alright, so by now I'm sure you know about the new security law in Hong Kong, but the list of the full details of the law has just been revealed. This article from BBC does a really good job at summarizing the most important changes to the law. So let's read on from down here. What is this law all about? Hong Kong was always meant to have a security law but could never pass one because it was so unpopular. So this is about China stepping in to ensure the city has a legal framework to deal with what it sees as serious challenges to its authority. The details of the law's 66 articles were kept secret until after it was passed. It criminalizes any act of these following points: secession, breaking away from the country; subversion, undermining the power or authority of the central government, that's the Chinese government; terrorism, using violence or intimidation against people; collusion with foreign or external forces. So these laws, they seem very vague. And I think that was the fear of the people of Hong Kong, that the laws would be created in such a way that they would be intentionally vague so they could be applied to more people, thereby granting the Chinese government more control. I mean, if terrorism is intimidation against people, it's really important to understand what intimidation is, because otherwise terrorism can be applied to a lot of different things, and they don't specify, so that's a huge problem. The article goes on to say, what will it mean in Hong Kong? It's a good question. The law came into effect at 2300 local time on 30th of June, an hour before the 23rd anniversary of the city's handover to China from British rule. It gives Beijing powers to shape life in Hong Kong it has never had before. Critics say it effectively curtails protest and freedom of speech. China has said it will return stability. Return stability in this case just sounds a lot like gaining control. Look at these laws. The new law's key provisions include that crimes of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces are punishable by a maximum sentence of life in prison. Damaging public transport facilities can be considered terrorism. You see what they just did there? They're saying that terrorism can give you life in prison, and at the same time, damaging public transport can be considered terrorism. That means essentially you can go to jail for life for damaging a bus or the like. Let's move on. Those found guilty will not be allowed to stand for public office. Companies can be fined if convicted under the law. Beijing will establish a new security office in Hong Kong with its own law enforcement personnel, neither of which would come under the local authorities' jurisdiction. This office can send some cases to be tried in mainland China, but Beijing has said it will only have that power over a tiny number of cases. A tiny number of cases is not a legal term. It's a way of saying we won't do it unless we will. Alright, so let's move on to the last section of the new laws. And these are the more extreme ones, so pay attention to these. In addition, Hong Kong will have to establish its own National Security Commission to enforce the laws with a Beijing-appointed advisor. Hong Kong's chief executive will have the power to appoint judges to hear national security cases, raising fears about judicial autonomy. Importantly, Beijing will have the power over how the law should be interpreted, not any Hong Kong judicial or policy body. If the law conflicts with any Hong Kong law, the Beijing law takes priority. Some trials will be heard behind closed doors, so no more journalism. People suspected of breaking the law can be wiretapped and put under surveillance. Management of foreign non-governmental organizations and news agencies will be strengthened. The last one. The law will also apply to non-permanent residents and people from outside of Hong Kong who are not permanent residents of Hong Kong. Okay, so no free press, no free media anymore. That's basically what they're saying. They're saying that we're going to control the media from now on. And also, look at this. The law will also apply to non-permanent residents and people from outside of... It's literally everyone. Anyone who comes into Hong Kong visiting will be under these laws. That means like someone like me would go visit Hong Kong. Potentially, as an extreme example, if I damage a bus, it could be, by the previous laws we just read, considered terrorism, and I could spend the rest of my days in jail for damaging a bus when I go visit Hong Kong. I promise you this will lead to a lot of countries who usually send tourists and whatever to Hong Kong. It will lead to a lot of them saying, listen, you shouldn't go there anymore. They're going to put travel restrictions on Hong Kong itself. And it's not because of the people of Hong Kong, it's because of the Chinese government taking over control, and there's no one to stop it. Okay, so that was a bit of a rant. I try to control myself normally, but these laws are extreme, and I'm really sad to see this for the people of Hong Kong. Recently, from covering these issues in Hong Kong, I can see that I've gained a lot of new subscribers from Hong Kong. So when I talk about these issues, and I've talked with you guys outside of these videos in the comment section and emails and private messages, you get invested into it. So it's difficult to just sit back and not get slightly emotional when you cover some of these issues. So although it doesn't affect me directly, I do want to say that I'm very sympathetic for what's going on right now in Hong Kong. Okay, let's move on. So all of this has led to a few countries now saying that they will no longer extradite people from their countries into Hong Kong if the Chinese government requests it. And in relation to that, look at this video.
Effective immediately, Canada will not permit the export of sensitive military items to Hong Kong. We are also suspending the Canada-Hong Kong extradition treaty and updating our travel advisory for Hong Kong.
So up until right now, a lot of these countries had these extradition treaties with Hong Kong and thereby China. These treaties would allow China to reach out to countries and demand that the Hong Kong citizens would be extradited back to Hong Kong to be persecuted. Now that is all going to stop now. Furthermore, Canada is thinking about changing their immigration laws specifically for people of Hong Kong so they can come to Canada and live there for much longer than what you're usually allowed. Much like what they're doing in the UK, where if you're a BNO passport holder, you can now have a clear path to UK citizenship. And look at this. This might come as a big surprise to you. Tech companies are actually beginning to deny the Chinese government access they have on their users' information because of the new security law. You see, social media companies have these agreements with intelligence agencies that they can at any time call up and get information on someone they're trying to find. But now Facebook, Google, Twitter, and a bunch of other companies are shutting this possibility for the Chinese government off so they can no longer just find people more easily. And you know there has had to been a lot of pressure on these tech giants when they go against the Chinese government, who they are usually deathly afraid of. So what's positive about all of this is that the world press is finally beginning to wake up again on the issue of Hong Kong and China. They did cover the protests in Hong Kong a little over a year ago, but ever since then they've been covered in an avalanche of media hysteria about Black Lives Matter protests and the pandemic worldwide. So I'm really happy to see more attention being given to this, as this new security law really vastly extends what China can permit itself to do within Hong Kong. If you have any thoughts on the issue or think that I forgot something important, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll make sure to involve it in my next video on the issue. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, remember to subscribe to the channel if you like the video. It really helps me out a lot, but what helps me out the most is if you share my videos on your social media. That's really the only way that YouTube will spread my videos, so it helps me out a lot. Thank you so much for watching and have a really good day. I'll see you in the next video.